Longeretta Variety's Senior TV Features Editor, and I am your host for today's Half Hour with One Day. I am so excited to be here today with Nicole Taylor, who adapted and executive produced the best-selling novel for Netflix. Nicole, thank you so much for doing this today.
So much a pleasure.
I'm so excited. Before we dive in, I want to, if you could just give a very quick, brief overview of what One Day is for our audience.
One Day is based on David Nicholls' global smash novel, One Day, and it is about two people from very different backgrounds, Emma and Dexter, who meet on the very last night of university at Edinburgh University in 1988. And she's kind of working class northerner, bit of a swot. I don't know what Americans call a swot, like a nerd, like a geek, like a book smart person. And he's an English posho. And they ostensibly have nothing in common, but there's this kind of pull between them, this almost like sort of counterintuitive, pull. So nothing is quite consummated that first night, but we find out what happens to them a year hence, a year hence, a year hence. So every episode of the series takes place a year to the day later than that very first meeting, which was the 15th of July, 1980.
I love that. Let's throw it to the trailer to show people a little bit more.
It's one of the great cosmic mysteries. How it is that someone can go from being a total stranger to being the most important person in your life. What do you want to be when you're 40?
Am I allowed to say rich? What about you?
I want to do something that actually makes a difference.
Change the world, you mean?
Maybe just my own tiny corner of it.
You have all these people telling you how great you are. You know, smart, and funny, talented.
Oi!
I've been telling you for years. So why don't you believe it? He still mates with Dexter. He's doing all right for himself.
Pizza Express would have been fine. After we met, I had a bit of a crush on you.
So what happened to it? This crush.
Back in the late 80s, it was all I thought about.
And now?
I thought I finally got rid of you.
I don't think you can. Let's pick up the phone, Emma. We're with Dex and M, aren't we?
Imagine one selected day struck out of your life and think how different its course would have been.
I'm emotional watching that, as if I haven't already watched the series through twice. So I kind of want to ask you, just kind of starting from the top, of how this came about and how you decided to adapt this, because of course the book came out in 2009, and what was it that made you say, like, I want to make this into a show?
Well, I had a 1-week-old baby at the time, and a producer, an old friend, contacted me to say that she had the rights and would I be interested in adapting this novel. And she knew how I felt about the novel, because back in the day, I was one of the early adopters. Before whole tube carriages were filled with that distinctive orange and white cover, I discovered this novel. It meant everything to me. I hugely related to the character of Emma, being a northerner myself, Scottish, obviously. And it just was such a kind of seminal text for me back in the day. But when the email came in, it was a time in my life where I decided to take a year off to be with my baby. So I was planning to say no to everything, but I just had to check that this novel didn't mean as much to me as it once did, you know. So I was like, I said probably not. I'm just going to check. I'll answer in the morning. And then inevitably I reread it. It was even more meaningful to me at like whatever I was then, 40, than I had been at 29, because I'd lived more life, and it was just unturndownable. So I just said, please, will you wait for me to figure out how to look after a baby, because I really desperately want to do this. I have to do it. And any hopes that I had that, oh, it wouldn't have stood the test of time, or it didn't feel the same or whatever, no, it was just totally transporting. And yeah, I had to do it. So very kindly, that brilliant production company, Drama Republic, waited for a year, and then we got started.
What was your relationship with David Nichols, of course, who wrote the book and later wrote the movie? But I'm curious, how much were you guys in contact? Because obviously, when it comes to adapting a book, especially a beloved book, there's always that worry of will they change too much? Will they not change enough? So, what was that kind of working relationship like between you guys?
Such a good question, because it had the potential to be doubly intimidating. One, because it's such a beloved novel and he is responsible for it. And two, he's a wonderful screenwriter himself. He and a wonderful adapter of other people's work. I don't know if you guys saw the Patrick Melrose adaptations. So, you know, two ways to feel terrified. But the guy himself is just such a mensch. He's the most egomaniacal person. He's just quite a shy guy, like just very modest. And so I felt like he's not the type of person anyway to sort of breathe down your neck. That's just not his style. But we got on so well that I kind of really relied on him, actually. So he was officially an executive producer, but the more the process went on, the more I was going to him as a kind of friend and a mentor. He was utterly wonderful. And there was no sort of tension there in terms of any kind of hierarchy or something. He was just a kind of, friend and mentor. And I think he really enjoyed being involved in it. And we had a massive laugh, and it was just a great, great team. So I feel like I had none of the pressure of what could have been, but I had a lot of support. So I feel very lucky to have had that. And also just that relationship was genuinely one of the most enjoyable aspects of the experience.
Well, I did want to just touch on it because a lot of people, you know, if you didn't know the book, some people knew the movie and didn't, or vice versa. Did you focus strictly on adapting the book, or did you also watch the film and kind of want to take parts of that as well?
Nope, book only, absolutely pure to the book. And that really was the take, insofar as there was a take. I just loved that book. I was obsessed with it over time. And now that streaming had been invented and Netflix were giving us the opportunity to make this in as many episodes at whatever episode length we wanted, it felt like finally there's this sort of perfect receptacle for translating this book onto the screen. So yeah, I just totally immersed myself in the book, really.
Yeah, definitely. I had read that originally you thought maybe you'd do 20 episodes for 20 years. Of course, you did a little bit less than that. So how did the number 14 come about?
As we were going along, it became clear that there were certain sort of dramatic limitations in some chapters to having that be a chapter on its own. So we tried to just find the best form for the story we were telling. So we felt free to write 20 episodes if that could be justified creatively, but neither did I feel that I wanted to be locked into that, because ultimately it's quite arbitrary. If you don't have a powerful enough story in a single episode, don't do it for the sake of like neatness.
Right. You didn't want to have filler episodes because there's enough in that story that is so powerful that it's not necessary.
I think so. And it's a big ask, I think, of the audience as well, to give them no plot. You've got two things to wonder about. Will they, won't they? And how is each of them getting on in their own life? And I feel like you can sustain interest in that. It was a fine line to like give it as much space as it needed and deserved, but not take the piss.
Well, before we continue, I want to throw to one other clip that we have, gives a little bit more context.
Would you like some bread?
No, not for me, thanks.
Okay.
But you have some.
Oh no, I'm fine for now. Thanks. To one night stands?
Are we drinking to one night stands in the future? Because we didn't actually have one.
Yeah. No, no.
Is it a religious thing? Not sleeping together?
Okay. Right. So unimaginable is it that someone might decline to have sex with you that it could only be explained as an order from God himself?
Shut up. No, it's just a question. I mean, maybe a stupid question, but...
My mum's Hindu. My dad's a lapsed Catholic. So, no. God was not involved. I hope it doesn't feel like a night wasted.
Wasn't a night wasted. It's memorable. not having sex with you was highly memorable.
Such an incredible scene to kind of encapsulate their relationship. I want to talk a little about choosing these two to be Dex and M, because as we know and we've seen in so many series, if the actors aren't right, if the chemistry is not there, the story like this doesn't work. So how was the process of finding the two of them?
Terrifying for the reason that you say, because without that, we would have had absolutely nothing. So I think the first important decision we made with casting was to cast younger actors, because and we knew we didn't want to do like heavy prosthetic things to denote aging. But neither do we want people with like receding hairlines pretending to be students. Like, we needed to see that dewiness of students in order to really relate to that moment in the first episode. Like, this is really the beginning of the rest of your lives, and you're so young, you've got no idea what's coming. And then it was over to our wonderful casting director, Rachel Sheridan, who I think she saw everyone for Emma and everyone for Dexter. But I mean, let me talk about Emma first, because she's kind of, I suppose, my sort of main sort of entry point creatively to the book and to the TV series, because I just love that character. I think she's a really interesting, quite unique female character, and I think British women, and I think lots of women, really relate to her. But in any case, once we saw Ambika, it was just like, the search is off. One, we were all in love with her from a series called This Is Gonna Hurt. I don't know if that went out over there with Ben Whishaw, and she just, like, everyone was mesmerized by her. But two, she was just so utterly Emma, just so Emma, the Emma of my dreams. You know, she's so, just as a person, she's very like intense, very clever, and she could also really, and just very, very funny, and she could also embody some of the kind of more irritating parts of Emma, which I thought were really important, that we were all like back in the day, patronizing, superior, you know, she just had it all, and it was just instant. So that was easy. Then we felt like amazing. And then I think Leo followed not very far behind. And at that point, he was making White Lotus, but we hadn't seen him in the White Lotus. We hadn't seen much, but in the room, he was just, I want to use that word again, mesmerizing, but he really was. He was just so incredible in the room. And it was very important to me to, for Dexter not to be a kind of archetypal British posho, because I just don't want to see that character anymore. It's not interesting. There's been so many iterations of that sub Hugh Grant type person. I don't think people are that interested in them, and I think it's a big ask for a young woman to buy into this wonderful woman Emma, being interested in somebody like that over 20 years. And I met up with a bunch of female screenwriter friends at the beginning of this. We're all like in our 30s or like early 40s, and we're like, what do you think young women are going to say? Are they going to be like, Emma, no, get some therapy, get rid? You know, I worried that the story wouldn't resonate with the contemporary audience because of him. Maybe women are just past that kind of person, but then actually no, because the way he's written in the novel, there's so much more to him. There's such an innate vulnerability. And to get back to the question, eventually, Leo just has that. He just has that from the get-go. You know, there is so much more to him than his kind of blitheness and his privilege. And then once we got them together, then it would, and honestly, from that moment on, I felt a kind of, first of all, it's just such a pleasure writing for them. And secondly, I felt like, yeah, this is going to work because of those two. Yeah.
100%. I love what you just brought up, because I had that actually written down as well, is that times have changed. We're not in the same time as we were when the book was written. And the book is, of course, excellent, but it is a different time now. And reading it back now, going back and reading it, a lot of the things that Dexter does, I'm like, Emma, run away. Like, you know, is that kind of initial reaction. Of course, you know, there's so much more to him, and he's so rootable. And of course, that's part of Leo's charm as well, as you can't root against him, even if he is doing these awful things. But I'm curious about that challenge for you of changing certain things to make it work in today's world. Of course, it takes place in a different time anyways, but making sure that it can relate to the audiences of today. Unlike, even though it was only in 2009, things have changed a lot, especially male-female dynamics since then.
I think for me, the biggest worry really was that lunch with friends. We were all just like, are Gen Z women just going to be like no, I'm sorry, this is bullshit. She just needs to step away. Is anyone going to be watching after episode 1, or are they just going to be screaming at the screen? So that required 2 things: a really, really divine, I want to say divine Leo, a really divine Dexter, who has everything we just talked about. But also I felt like I personally wanted to see an Emma who was, as I was saying, prickly, priggish, pretentious, sometimes a little bit like humorless. You know, every single thing I've ever written, I always get the same note, which is make the female character more likable, make the female character more likable. And I never do, and I always get away with it, because if you're writing, and if you're writing somebody that the audience can understand, then they don't. That's my personal sort of like credo. If you can understand why someone is the way they are, then they don't have to be likable. So I felt like Ambika could be all of those things, but you would still root for her, because she just has this kind of just divine quality, and every emotion is readable on her face, like dream performance, both of them, because so much subtextual is just there in their face. And also with the aging, like they physically age without any kind of, with minimal hair and makeup and that sort of thing. They were just so bloody skilled. And I just felt like a lot of my worries at the outset, they just went once I'd seen those 2 in a room together.
Yeah, absolutely. When you talk about, obviously jumping around times can be challenging for filming. Of course, there wasn't a huge differences. There wasn't like major prosthetics or anything like that. But did you guys film? What order did you film in? Did you hop around a bit? Was there something that you guys filmed? You wanted to film certain things early on. What was that like?
So yeah, we filmed the ending within the first couple of months. But to be honest, there were that many episodes to write. I was like, I just had my head down, like I was just writing the whole time. So if I really, really rack my brains, I can remember the order, but basically it was pretty much consecutive, apart from episode 14 was filmed by the lead director, Molly Manners, up the front.
Okay. I don't want to spoil, obviously, for people who somehow still don't know what happens at the end of the show. But I'm curious going in, and I know this is kind of difficult to talk about without spoiling, but if we can try. Did you know going in you were going to keep that same ending and that same like specific thing that happens? Did you debate changing anything major, whether it was that or something else? How much of that conversations, and were those conversations with David? What was that process like?
I re-interviewed that ending before committing to it. So I spent some considerable time reflecting on whether a different ending was appropriate. Some have made the argument about the book in the past that his story is the dominant story. And I don't agree with that. I don't feel that myself, but it was very important to me in any case to make sure that that wasn't the case with the series. So in that light, I re-interviewed the book's ending to make sure that it didn't do that thing where he was somehow higher in the mix than her in the global, to sort of overall. And fundamentally, I felt like if you take that away, the meaning of the piece goes away with it. So I didn't take it as a matter of course. I reflected on if it didn't exist, what would I do with it? I might not have had the bottle to do that, but actually it's appropriate to the theme, it's appropriate to the meaning, and actually it's justified. So yeah, I reviewed it and I went for it, and I felt comfortable with having done that because I didn't just grab it without thought.
Definitely. Was there anything else specific? I know not everybody who's watched has read the book either. Was there anything else specific that you changed or that you wanted to change? Like what did you have any of those kind of thoughts when you were reading the book again?
Something that felt important, it's small, but it felt important overall, is to develop the character of Tilly, Emma's friend. But you're not going to necessarily know that unless she's adored by someone as wonderful and as warm as Tilly. And I wanted Emma to be brittle and to be a bit of a loner and to be all those more difficult things, but that would be much more interesting and also just much more enjoyable if it was set against her lifelong friendship with this fabulous girl. So that was a small decision, but I think it was very important to Emma's character, and also it was a delight writing for Amber, that actress, who was really, really wonderful. So there was lots of tiny wee things like that I think contributed to the whole. And there was other things that were just annoying to have to let go of. Like Emma spends 2 chapters working in that shitty Mexican restaurant. So to me, that was dead interesting to come back to her in 2 different episodes. Episode 3, she's like a waitress on the floor. Episode 4, she's the manager. Like, to me, that's like super interesting. Netflix is like, no, we don't need to see that Mexican restaurant twice. So that was like one of those tussles. And then so many things you think are so important, you like broke your heart over them, are like nothing, and you didn't need to fight for them. But you know, things like that pop up at the time. But there were no, I can't think of any large scale things that I wanted to bring in from the outside or to chop away. I think just lots of kind of on the control panel going like that, wee things.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier that Leo was filming The White Lotus during this. I spoke to him about that as well. And I'm curious logistically how that worked filming at the same time. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sorry, I misled you. He was filming The White Lotus during the auditions.
Okay, so he just flew in when he was at auditioning.
Yeah. No. It was weird. It was like no one knew who this dude was until halfway through the filming. And then suddenly it was like, well, we knew he was just a stone cold genius. Now everyone does. And oh my God, he's like massive. He's everywhere. But he's the same lovely fellow. They worked so hard. It was such a long schedule. And yeah, he is fantastic.
Absolutely. What was the toughest, I guess, toughest time period to capture? I mean, I know that that's kind of goes along with the storyline, but if there was a year, which episode was the most challenging for you to kind of go about?
I was desperate to see more of Ambika because she's just so wonderful. And I just really, really wanted to do justice to that character in that episode that was about her writing, her ambitions. At that point, she's kind of, I don't want to say because I don't want to spoil it, but essentially it was the moment in her life where, are you going to be a writer or are you not? And no one cares. And I remember that. And I relate to that so much. It's like, do it or don't do it. Like, you've got no confidence. You know, you come from a working class background, you know, you feel like such an outsider, blah, 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 blah. That's never going to change. But this is the moment, you're 29, you're going to sit in your arse and actually do it. Or are you going to not do it, but please stop talking about it? And I'm really passionate about that. I've lived that. And I just really wanted to give that to Emma. And Ambika was just so wonderful in that episode. And I sort of polished it a few times, and she saw it and she was like, no, that's not right. Not in a mean way, in an incredibly helpful. She's a great writer as well, Ambika, and very, very funny. So I found her just a really useful sounding board for that episode. So, and she gave me the confidence to just strip away any other characters. Tilly was in it for a bit, but we got rid of her. And then we just ended up with this pure Emma episode. And I think it's like my favorite episode of the whole series. It's just pure Emma.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know you're adapting right now, you're adapting Wild Rose into a musical, and I'm curious how different the process is into one, because you wrote the original piece that's based on, but also in comparison to adapting into a musical versus a book and into theater. So how is that kind of different, and what is more difficult?
Oh my goodness. I can't emphasize enough how much I do not have a clue what I'm doing. I have never written for the theatre before, ever. However, it's being directed by the wonderful John Tiffany, who brought the Harry Potter plays to the West End and to Broadway, and he did Black Watch and The Glass Menagerie, and he is completely amazing. So no question is too stupid for John Tiffany. He doesn't mind. So I've just had an absolute ball learning how to write for theatre. So it's also been but I find it unbelievably difficult not to have the toolkit that I have for TV. So it's like, so basic. I've never even written a student play. Like, how do you do what's the equivalent of close up on stage? I've asked John 50 times. He's like, we talked about this. You isolate the stage with lighting. I'm like, how do you do no dialogue on the stage? Anyway, I've learned over many years, because we've been developing it for a while. So it's just amazing to get the chance to revisit that story, but in a completely different medium with different cast. And I always dreamed it would be a musical, and always dreamed it would be John Tiffany making it. So I've had to do an Emma and just get over my kind of inferiority complex and outsider Michigas and just get on with it. And yeah, it's gonna open in 2025.
Could one day ever be a theatrical musical?
I'm sure people will give it a good go. I mean, why not? Why not? I mean,
I
it's
would
the
be
most
so
beautiful
into
thing
that.
ever. Yeah.
The wedding scene alone, I could see as such a great musical number. Well, I guess before we wrap up, something that we ask everybody at the end is, in case someone hasn't had the chance to see One Day, is there one thing about the limited series that stands out to you that would make someone want to check it out?
I think it's great to have the chance to watch a series about two people that are unbothered by plot or twists or anything procedural. And I'm not being snobbish saying that. I felt hugely privileged to get the chance to write a story that was just about people, and I didn't have to build in any kind of like mechanic. And I feel like there's so much of that kind of material, and some of it's phenomenal, but it's not often you get a chance to just watch just people being like human beings living scenarios that hopefully you will relate to. And I remember very pretentiously in the very beginning pitching this, I said, I want to give people this kind of Proustian rush where they just suddenly remember what it was like to be that age and that stage. And I hope that that's something that One Day does that other stuff hasn't done recently. And maybe that's enjoyable. I hope it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for doing this. Thank you so much to our friends at Netflix, and of course to Nicole for joining us today. And to everyone watching, thank you for joining us for Half Hour With.